Corporal Riley Webb knelt in the red dust of Kethvar, her hands working carefully to set up the drilling equipment. The wind howled across the dead planet's surface, carrying particles that scratched against her helmet visor. She had been part of this expedition for 3 weeks now, living in cramped quarters with scientists from 6 different alien species. Today was supposed to be the big day. Today they would finally open the vault that everyone had been talking about since they landed. "Be careful with those cables," a deep voice called out. Riley looked up to see Professor Vexith standing nearby, his tall blue frame casting a long shadow across the excavation site. The Vaker scholar had been nervous all morning, pacing back and forth while the human engineers did their work. "This location is sacred to many civilizations. We cannot afford any mistakes." Riley gave him a thumbs up and continued connecting the power lines. She had learned early on that the aliens took this stuff very seriously. To them, this wasn't just another dig site. This was history. This was legend made real. The vault doors stood before them, massive slabs of some unknown metal that had survived millions of years without a scratch. Strange symbols covered every inch of the surface, glowing faintly in the dim light of Kethvar's distant sun. Riley had asked about the symbols once, but Vexith had just shaken his head and said they were older than any known language. "Power levels are stable," called out Jenkins, another human engineer working on the opposite side of the door. "We're good to go whenever you're ready, Professor." Vexith raised one of his long arms, and the entire excavation team fell silent. Aliens and humans alike stopped what they were doing and gathered around. Riley stood up, brushing the dust off her knees, and joined the crowd. She could feel the excitement in the air. Even the normally stoic Thorian warriors looked interested. "After 3 weeks of preparation," Vexith began, his voice carrying across the silent crowd, "we stand at the threshold of one of the galaxy's greatest mysteries. Behind these doors lies the Sentinel armor, forged by the predecessors before recorded history began." Riley had heard the stories during the long journey to Kethvar. The predecessors were like ghosts in the galaxy's past. Nobody knew where they came from or where they went. They had left behind ruins on 100 worlds, technology that nobody could fully understand, and legends that every species seemed to share. The Sentinel armor was supposed to be their greatest creation. Vexith pressed his palm against a panel beside the door, and ancient machinery groaned to life. The symbols flared bright blue, then white, then faded to a soft glow. The doors began to slide apart with a hiss of air that had been trapped inside for who knows how long. Riley wrinkled her nose at the smell, old and stale and somehow wrong. The chamber beyond was smaller than she expected. Just a simple room with smooth walls and a single pedestal in the center. On that pedestal sat the armor. Riley caught her breath. She had seen a lot of alien technology in her 5 years in the Corps, but nothing like this. The armor seemed to be made of liquid metal that somehow held its shape. It shifted and flowed even as it sat perfectly still, colors dancing across its surface like oil on water. Sometimes it looked silver, sometimes gold, sometimes a deep blue that matched Vexith's skin. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. "The Sentinel armor," Vexith whispered, and Riley had never heard such reverence in anyone's voice before. "For 10,000 years, warriors from across the galaxy have attempted to bond with it. Kings and champions, heroes and legends. All of them failed. The armor accepts only those it deems worthy, those with pure strength of spirit." "What happens if you're not worthy?" Riley asked quietly. "Nothing," replied Vexith. "It simply does not respond. You can touch it, lift it, even try to wear it. But it will not bond. It will not awaken." The team began setting up scanning equipment around the chamber. Riley's job was to install a sensor package near the pedestal itself. She grabbed her toolkit and made her way carefully across the chamber floor, her boots echoing in the quiet space. Up close, the armor was even more incredible. She could see tiny patterns shifting beneath its surface like circuits or maybe veins. It was definitely not human-sized. The proportions were all wrong, too tall and too broad. But then again, it wasn't made for humans. Riley pulled out the sensor device and looked for a good spot to mount it. The pedestal itself was smooth and featureless, so she would need to place it on the floor nearby. She knelt down and started clearing away some of the dust that had accumulated over the centuries. That's when her hand slipped. She had been reaching past the pedestal to brush away debris, and her glove caught on something. Riley jerked her hand back instinctively, but not before her fingers brushed against the armor's surface. Everything happened so fast. The armor moved. It didn't just move, it flowed like water, like it had been waiting for this exact moment. Riley tried to pull her hand away, but the armor was already spreading up her arm, warm and alive against her skin. She opened her mouth to scream, but no sound came out. Her heart hammered in her chest as the liquid metal raced across her body, covering her shoulders, her chest, flowing down her legs. Behind her, she heard shouting. Aliens and humans alike were yelling, but their voices sounded far away, muffled. The armor wrapped around her head, and for one terrifying second she couldn't see or breathe. Then it was over. Riley stood up slowly, her whole body trembling. She could see again, but everything looked different. Sharper. Clear. Information flooded her vision, text and numbers and diagrams that she somehow understood even though she had never seen them before. She looked down at her hands and saw them encased in armor that fit her perfectly, moving with her like a second skin. The chamber was dead silent. Every single person in the room was staring at her with expressions ranging from shock to disbelief to something that might have been fear. Vexith was the first to speak, his voice barely a whisper. Impossible. A human? But your species has only been traveling the stars for a few generations. You haven't even left your own small corner of the galaxy. Riley tried to respond, but her voice came out strange, amplified somehow by the armor. I don't understand. What just happened to me? A Thorian warrior stepped forward, his 4 arms crossed over his massive chest. The armor has chosen, he rumbled. After 10,000 years of silence, the Sentinel armor has found someone it deems worthy. But I didn't do anything, Riley protested. She looked at her armored hands again, turning them over. The metal flowed and shifted with her movements, somehow both solid and liquid at the same time. I just touched it by accident. There are no accidents with predecessor technology, Vexith said. He had recovered from his initial shock and was now circling Riley, studying her like she was some kind of specimen. The armor chose you the moment you entered this chamber. Perhaps the moment you landed on this planet. Who can say how it makes its decisions? Riley felt power thrumming through her entire body, like electricity running through her veins. It wasn't painful, but it wasn't entirely comfortable either. She felt strong, stronger than she had ever felt in her life. And there was something else too, something harder to define. A sense of connection, like the armor was trying to communicate with her. Can I take it off? She asked. The looks on everyone's faces told her the answer before Vexith spoke. No, Corporal Webb, he said quietly. The Sentinel armor bonds at a neural level. It is part of you now. For better or worse, you are the Sentinel. Riley looked around at the stunned faces of her fellow expedition members, human and alien alike, and felt her entire world shift beneath her feet. This was supposed to be a simple assignment. 3 months of guard duty while scientists poked at old ruins. Now she was wearing a piece of ancient armor that apparently nobody in the galaxy had been able to claim for 10,000 years. What does that mean? She asked. What's a Sentinel supposed to do? Vexith's expression was grim. That, Corporal Webb, is what we are all about to find out. Commander Draxon stood at the head of the council table, his blue skin darkening to almost purple with anger. His fist came down hard on the polished surface, making everyone in the room flinch. This is completely unacceptable, he shouted, his voice echoing off the metal walls of the command ship. The human must remove that armor right now. Immediately. I will not discuss this any further. Riley stood in the center of the circular chamber, surrounded by representatives from a dozen different alien species. Some she recognized from the expedition. Others had arrived in the last few hours, important people summoned the moment word got out about what had happened. The armor still covered her body, its surface rippling slowly like water. She could feel all their eyes on her, studying her, judging her. Next to Riley stood Dr. Grant Peterson, the leader of the human expedition. He was a thin man with gray hair and glasses that kept sliding down his nose. Right now he looked exhausted, like he had been arguing for hours. Which he probably had been. Commander Draxon, please listen to reason, Peterson said, pushing his glasses back up. We've run every scan we have. The armor has integrated completely with Riley's nervous system. It's connected to her brain, her spine, everything. We can't just pull it off like a jacket. Then find a way, Draxon snapped. Cut it off if you must. That would kill her, Peterson said quietly. The shock alone would stop her heart. We're talking about removing something that's woven itself into every nerve in her body. A murmur ran through the assembled aliens. Some looked disturbed by this information. Others looked like they didn't care. Vexith, the Vaker professor who had been at the excavation, stepped forward from where he had been standing against the wall. His expression was troubled. Perhaps death would be preferable to the alternative, he said, though he didn't sound happy about it. The Sentinel armor was created for a specific purpose. It was meant for the chosen one, the warrior destined to stand against the Void Collective when they return from dark space. This young soldier from a species barely a century into space travel, cannot possibly be that chosen warrior. Riley had been quiet up until now, listening to everyone argue about her like she wasn't even there. But something about Vexitha's words made anger flare in her chest. The armor seemed to respond to her emotion, glowing slightly brighter. "Then test me," she said. Her voice came out stronger than she expected, amplified somehow by the armor. The entire room went silent. Every alien head turned to look at her. "What did you say?" Draxon asked, his eyes narrowing. Riley took a step forward. "You keep saying the armor only chooses worthy warriors. Well, it chose me. I didn't ask for this. I didn't even want this. But it happened. So if you don't believe I'm worthy, then test me. Prove I'm not good enough." A Thorian warrior, the same species as the one from the excavation, made a sound that might have been a laugh. "The human speaks boldly," he rumbled. "Perhaps too boldly." Draxon stared at Riley for a long moment. She could see him thinking, calculating. Finally he smiled, but it wasn't a friendly expression. "Very well, Corporal Webb. You want to prove yourself? Then you will face our finest warriors in combat. When you fail, and you will fail, we will find a way to extract that armor. Even if it means scraping it off your corpse." Peterson grabbed Riley's arm. "You don't have to do this," he whispered urgently. "We can figure something else out." But Riley shook her head. "No, document. They're never going to accept this unless I show them. Unless I prove it." The trials were scheduled for the next morning. Riley spent the night in a small quarters on the ship, unable to sleep. The armor had retracted slightly, showing her face and hands, but she could still feel its presence on her skin. She kept thinking about what Draxon had said. Their finest warriors. She was just a corporal. Just an engineer who knew how to fix equipment and follow orders. What had she gotten herself into? When morning came, they led her to the training arena, a large circular space with high ceilings and reinforced walls. Hundreds of aliens had gathered to watch, filling the observation decks above. Riley saw Peterson up there, standing with Vexith. The professor looked grave. "Your first opponent," Draxon announced from his position at the judges' platform. "Champion Krell of the Thorian clans." The warrior who entered the arena was massive. He stood at least 8 feet tall, with 4 thick arms and skin that looked like natural armor plating. Scars crisscrossed his body, each one probably a story of past battles. He carried no weapons, but Riley figured he didn't need any. "I will try not to damage the armor too badly when I peel it off, you little human," Krell said, his voice like grinding stones. Riley felt her heart pounding. The armor seemed to sense her fear and responded, information flooding her vision. Weak points. Movement patterns. Attack angles. It was analyzing Krell even as he walked toward her. The fight began with a horn blast. Krell charged immediately, all 4 arms reaching for her. He was fast for something so big. But Riley was faster. The armor moved with her thoughts, almost before she had them. She ducked under his first swing, felt the rush of air as his fist passed over her head. Her own fist came up, guided by the armor, and connected with Krell's knee. The impact surprised her. She felt the Thorian's leg buckle, saw him stumble. The armor had amplified her strength, but more than that, it had shown her exactly where to hit. Krell roared and spun, 2 arms sweeping low while the other 2 went high. It should have been impossible to dodge. But the armor was already moving Riley's body, her training from the Marines combining with something else, something the armor provided. She saw the pattern in his attack, saw the opening. She went through it. Her elbow caught Krell in the throat. Not hard enough to kill, but hard enough to make him gag. While he was off balance, she swept his legs. All 4 of his arms flailed as he went down hard, the impact shaking the arena floor. Riley stepped back, breathing hard. The entire fight had lasted maybe 30 seconds. The observation decks were silent. Then someone started clapping slowly. Riley looked up and saw it was Peterson, a huge grin on his face. "Next opponent," Draxon called out, his voice tight. They sent a Vaker speed fighter next, someone from their special forces. This one was all about fast strikes and rapid movement. The fight lasted a little longer, maybe a minute. Riley learned that the armor didn't just enhance her strength. It enhanced everything. Her reflexes, her tactical thinking, her ability to read her opponent. Every trick she had learned in boot camp, every lesson from combat training, the armor took it and made it better. After the Vaker came a Grendok champion, a species known for their tactical genius in combat. Riley beat him too. Then came 3 more warriors, each from different species, each supposed to be the best their people had to offer. Riley faced them all. And she won every single time. It wasn't easy. She got hit more than once. The armor protected her, but she could still feel the impacts. By the end, she was exhausted, her muscles burning and her breath coming in gasps. But she was still standing. The last warrior bowed to her before leaving the arena, a sign of respect that made the crowd murmur. Riley stood in the center of the arena, the armor's glow finally dimming as her adrenaline faded. She looked up at the observation deck where Draxon sat. The commander rose slowly from his seat. He walked down to the arena floor, his boots clicking on the metal. When he reached Riley, he studied her for a long moment. His expression was unreadable. "I have commanded fleets for 40 years, he said finally. "I have seen warriors from 100 worlds. I thought I knew what made someone worthy." He paused. "The armor did not just make you stronger, did it?" Riley shook her head. "No, sir. Made me better. It took everything I already knew and enhanced it. My training, my instincts, my ability to think under pressure. It's like it was waiting for someone who already had the foundation, and then it built on top of that." Draxon nodded slowly. "Your species is young. Inexperienced in the ways of the galaxy. But perhaps that is not the same as being unworthy." He looked at the armor, then back at Riley's face. "Perhaps the armor sees something in humans that we have not yet recognized. Adaptability, creativity, the courage to face impossible odds." He took a step back and gave Riley a formal salute, his fist over his heart. "I was wrong about you, Corporal Webb," he said. The armor chose wisely. Riley was in her quarters trying to get some sleep when the alarm went off. The sound cut through the quiet of the ship like a knife, loud and urgent and terrifying. She was on her feet before she was fully awake, the armor already flowing over her body as if it knew something was wrong. She ran through the corridors, her boots pounding on the metal floor. Other crew members were rushing past her, humans and aliens alike, all heading to their stations. Nobody knew what was happening yet, but everyone could feel it. Something bad. Something really bad. The command deck was chaos when Riley burst through the doors. Dr. Peterson was already there, standing next to the main display screen. Vexith was at the sensor station, his long fingers flying over the controls. But it was his face that made Riley's stomach drop. The Vaker professor had gone pale, his normally dark blue skin turned almost white. "What's going on?" Riley demanded, crossing the deck in quick strides. "What's the alarm for?" Vexith didn't look at her. His eyes were fixed on the sensor readout and his hands were shaking. "Long-range sensors," he said, and his voice sounded hollow, distant. "We're picking up ships. Dozens of them. Emerging from dark space at the edge of the system." "What kind of ships?" Peterson asked, moving closer to look at the screen. Vexith finally turned to face them, and Riley had never seen such fear in anyone's eyes before. "Void collective signatures," he whispered. "After 10,000 years of silence, after all this time, they've come back." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Riley had heard the stories about the Void Collective during the expedition briefings. An ancient enemy that had nearly destroyed all civilization before the predecessors stopped them. They were supposed to be gone, disappeared into dark space, never to return. But here they were. All around the command deck, aliens were staring at the screens in horror. A Thorian warrior actually took a step backward, something Riley had never seen one of them do. The Grendok officer at the weapons station was making a strange clicking sound that she realized was panic. Commander Draxon's voice came over the ship's intercom. "All ships, battle stations. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill. Coalition fleet, prepare for immediate mobilization." Through the viewport, Riley could see other ships in the fleet coming to life. Running lights blazing, weapons systems powering up, engines firing. But even as they moved into defensive positions, she could see the fear. It was in the way the ships moved, too fast, too jerky. These warriors and soldiers had trained for combat, but not for this. Not for an enemy out of nightmares and legends. "We're not ready for this," Peterson said quietly, voicing what everyone was thinking. "Nobody alive has fought the Void Collective. We don't know their tactics, their weapons, their capabilities. All we have are stories." Riley felt something stirring inside her. Not her own thoughts, but something from the armor. It was trying to tell her something, show her something important. She closed her eyes and concentrated. "Let me help," she said suddenly. "The armor, it's reacting to this. I can feel it trying to communicate." "What do you mean?" Vexith asked, turning away from the sensors. Riley didn't answer. She focused harder on the sensation, letting the armor's presence fill her mind. And suddenly, her vision exploded with light. Holographic displays materialized around her, filling the air of the command deck. Star maps appeared, showing hundreds of systems across the galaxy. Coordinates scrolled past in languages she shouldn't understand but somehow did. Schematics and diagrams of massive structures on distant worlds. What in the name of the ancients? Vexith breathed. Peterson was already moving around the displays, his eyes wide. These are predecessor installations. Defensive systems. I'm seeing coordinates for, what, 40? 50 different worlds. He pointed at one schematic. This one's in the Corvin system. And this one's near the Thorian homeworld. They're everywhere. Riley opened her eyes but kept the displays active. I see them. Weapons platforms, shield generators, things I don't even have names for. They're spread across the entire coalition space. But they're all offline, Vexith said, studying the data. Dormant for thousands of years. Even if we could reach them, we don't have the technology to activate predecessor systems. The armor pulsed against Riley's skin, warm and insistent. She felt her consciousness expanding, reaching out beyond the ship, beyond the planet, touching something vast and ancient. It was like putting her hand on a sleeping giant and feeling it stir. No, she said slowly, understanding flooding through her. They're not dormant. They're waiting. They've been waiting all this time. Waiting for what? Peterson asked. Riley looked down at her armored hands. For me. For the Sentinel. She closed her eyes again and let her awareness stretch further. It was terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. She could feel the installations now, sense them like distant lights in the darkness. And they could feel her too. They were responding to her presence, systems that had been silent for millennia beginning to wake up. The predecessors didn't disappear, Riley said, her voice distant as she focused on the connection. They didn't die out or leave the galaxy. They transformed themselves. They became the network. All these installations, all these defensive systems, they're all connected. And I'm the key. The Sentinel is the key to waking them up. She opened her eyes and the holographic displays shifted, showing new information. Power routing. Activation sequences. A path lighting up on the star map, leading to the nearest installation. I can activate them, Riley said, looking at Commander Draxon who had just entered the command deck. I can turn on the predecessor defenses. But I need to go to them, physically interface with the systems. And we need to start with the closest one before the Void Collective gets here. Draxon strode across the deck, his earlier anger at her completely gone. Now he looked at her like she was his only hope. How long do we have? Vexith checked his sensors. The Void ships are still at the system's edge. At their current speed, maybe 6 hours before they reach the inhabited worlds. And how long to reach the nearest installation? Draxon asked Riley. She consulted the armor's data. 3 hours. It's on a moon in the 4th orbital. An ancient weapons platform. If I can activate it, it'll give us firepower like nothing the Coalition has. Draxon didn't hesitate. You'll take the Starfire. It's our fastest scout ship. Captain Rennick will get you there. He paused, then did something Riley never expected. The proud Vaker commander stood straight and gave her a full military salute, his fist over his heart. Corporal Webb, he said formally. The fate of millions rests on your shoulders. May fortune favor the Sentinel. Riley returned the salute, trying not to let her hand shake. 6 hours ago, she had been celebrating her victories in the arena. Now she was being asked to save the galaxy. I won't let you down, sir, she said. I know you won't, Draxon replied. Because the armor wouldn't have chosen you if you would. Peterson grabbed Riley's arm as she turned to leave. Are you sure about this? That's a lot of responsibility for one person. Riley looked at her old professor and managed a small smile. Doc, I stopped being sure about anything the moment I touched that armor. But this is what it was made for. This is why the predecessors created the Sentinel. Not to sit in a vault for 10,000 years, but for this exact moment. She pulled her arm free gently. Besides, I'm a Marine. We don't run when things get scary. We run toward them. Peterson laughed, though it sounded more like a sob. Then go save us all, Riley. She ran for the hangar bay, the armor already calculating trajectories and power requirements. Behind her, she could hear Draxon issuing orders, the Coalition fleet preparing for battle. The Void Collective was coming. But so was the Sentinel. And after 10,000 years of waiting, the predecessor's greatest weapon was finally going to show the galaxy what it could do. Riley just hoped she was ready for what came next. The Void Collective hit New Haven like a hammer striking glass. Riley watched from the hull of the command ship as their dark vessels descended on the colony world, blocking out the stars. She stood in the vacuum of space, the armor creating a protective field around her that let her breathe, let her survive where no human should be able to exist. Below her boots, the ship's metal hull stretched away in all directions. Above her, the battle raged. She had been fighting for 6 hours straight. 6 hours of jumping from ship to ship, coordinating defenses, directing fire. She'd managed to activate 3 predecessor installations, and their ancient weapons had lit up the darkness like lightning strikes. Void Collective ships had burned, their strange organic hulls cracking apart under beams of energy that hadn't fired in 10,000 years. But it wasn't enough. For every enemy ship they destroyed, 2 more seemed to appear. The Void Collective just kept coming, wave after wave of darkness pouring out of their portal in deep space. New Haven spun below her, a blue and green world that reminded Riley of Earth. 2 million people lived down there. Farmers and teachers and children and families. Most of them weren't even human. New Haven was a colony world that a dozen species called home. And right now, evacuation ships were scrambling to get as many of them off the planet as possible before the Void Collective reached the surface. Riley, we're picking up massive energy spikes in your armor. Peterson's voice crackled in her helmet comm. He sounded scared, and the doctor never sounded scared. What's happening? Your readings are going off the charts. Riley could feel it building inside her. The armor was warm against her skin, warmer than it had ever been. And there was something else, a presence in her mind that wasn't her own thoughts. The armor's AI, speaking to her for the first time with actual words instead of just feelings and images. A choice lay before her. She could see it clearly now, like a door opening in her mind. The final protocol. The ultimate purpose of the Sentinel armor. She could merge with the network. Become one with all the predecessor installations across the galaxy. Her consciousness would expand beyond her body, spreading through ancient systems on 100 worlds. She would become immortal, eternal, a guardian that could protect civilization forever. But she would have to leave everything behind. Her body. Her humanity. Her life. The armor showed her what it would be like. She would exist as pure energy, pure thought, spread across light years of space. No more physical form. No more Riley Webb from Colorado who liked coffee in the morning and old movies at night. Just the Sentinel, forever watching, forever defending. Riley, talk to me, Peterson was saying. What's going on? She looked down at New Haven. The evacuation ships were launching, tiny specks rising from the surface. But there were too many people and not enough ships. They needed more time. Just a few more minutes for the slow transports to lift off, for the refugee vessels to clear the atmosphere. The Void Collective wasn't going to give them that time. Their advanced ships were already entering orbit, weapons charging. Riley made her decision. Doc, she said quietly. Tell my mom I'm sorry I won't be home for Christmas. What? Riley, what are you talking about? She didn't answer. Instead, she reached deep into the armor systems and activated the merger protocol. Riley, don't. Peterson shouted, understanding flooding his voice. Whatever you're thinking, don't do it. We'll find another way. But there was no other way. Riley knew that. The math was simple and brutal. Without someone to coordinate all the predecessor installations at once, without someone to direct their fire with perfect precision, New Haven would fall. 2 million people would die. The transformation began. Riley felt her body start to dissolve. It didn't hurt exactly, but it felt wrong in ways she couldn't describe. Her hands became light, transparent, and glowing. She could see through them to the stars beyond. Her legs, her arms, her chest, all of it breaking apart into energy. But even as she faded, she kept fighting. Her consciousness expanded and she could suddenly feel all 3 of the installations she'd activated. She could see through their sensors, fire their weapons. A Void Collective cruiser was moving toward an evacuation ship. Riley destroyed it with a beam from the installation in the Corvin system, light years away but as close as her own hand. Another enemy ship, another precise strike. She was buying time, precious seconds for the people below. On the bridge of his flagship, Commander Draxon stood frozen, watching the telemetry from Riley's position. His crew was silent around him, all of them staring at the same data. She's dissolving, one of his officers whispered. The human is sacrificing herself. Draxon's jaw tightened. For a colony that isn't even her species. Most of the people on New Haven are Thorian and Grendok. She's never met them. They're nothing to her. Vexith was there too, his face stricken. I questioned whether she was worthy, he said softly. I doubted the armor's choice. But now I understand. It wasn't her strength that made her worthy. It wasn't her skill in combat. He looked at Draxon. It was this. The courage to give up everything for strangers. That's what the predecessors were looking for. Riley was almost gone now. Just a vague outline of light where her body used to be. Her consciousness was spreading so thin, touching so many systems at once. She could feel herself slipping away, becoming something else, something not human anymore. One more evacuation ship launching. Then another. Come on, she thought. Get clear. Just get clear. And then something impossible happened. The armor stopped. The merger reversed. Riley felt herself snapping back together like a rubber band pulled too tight and then released. Energy became flesh again. Light became skin and bone. She gasped, her lungs suddenly remembering how to breathe, and collapsed onto the hull of the ship. A voice filled her mind, clear and powerful. It wasn't the armor's usual whispers and suggestions. This was different. This was the armor's true AI, the consciousness that the predecessors had built into it. Protocol violation, it announced. Final test complete. What? Riley gasped, her whole body shaking. She looked down at her hands. Solid. Real. Still covered in armor, but flesh underneath. What's happening? The AI's voice was almost gentle. The predecessors designed this armor with a purpose beyond warfare. They sought to answer a question. What makes someone truly worthy of ultimate power? They built the merger protocol not as a tool but as a test. Images flooded Riley's mind. She saw the predecessors, ancient and wise, debating over the armor's creation. They had seen too many civilizations fall because powerful weapons ended up in the wrong hands. Leaders who craved power for its own sake. Warriors who loved destruction. Tyrants who wanted to rule forever. So they built the Sentinel armor with one final test built into its core. Would the bearer choose power or mercy? The AI continued. Would they take the offer of immortality and godhood? Or would they sacrifice even that for others? Riley understood. The merger wasn't the armor's true purpose. It was a trap, a test of character. The predecessors wanted to see if whoever wore the armor would choose to give up everything, even immortal power, to save people they didn't know. You chose sacrifice, the AI said. You were willing to abandon your humanity, your very existence, for strangers. You have passed the final test. The armor is truly yours now, Sentinel. All of its power, with none of the cost. The armor blazed with new light. Riley felt systems activating that she hadn't known existed. Weapons she hadn't imagined. Capabilities beyond anything she'd used before. This was what the Sentinel was meant to be. Not a sacrifice, but a protector who had proven they would sacrifice if needed. She stood up on shaking legs and looked at the battle around her. The Void Collective was still coming, but now she had the full power of the predecessors at her command. All ships, she said, her voice carrying across every comm channel in the fleet. I'm still here. And now I'm going to show these things why the predecessors built this armor. On his bridge, Draxon smiled for the first time in hours. That's the Sentinel we need, he said. Riley raised her hand toward the enemy fleet, and ancient weapons across 3 star systems fired as one. The real battle was about to begin. The armor erupted with light so bright that Riley had to close her eyes. It wasn't the soft glow she'd gotten used to over the past few days. This was something completely different, like a star being born on her skin. She felt power flooding through every cell in her body, systems activating that she hadn't even known existed. New weapons materialized around her, projections of pure energy that hung in space like deadly constellations. Targeting systems lit up her vision, showing her weak points on every Void Collective ship in the battle. Shield generators hummed to life, creating barriers of force that could protect entire vessels. And deeper than all of that, she felt connections forming to every single predecessor installation across the galaxy. This was what the Sentinel armor was truly meant to be. Not just a weapon or a tool, but a living network of ancient power that responded to one person's will. And now, after passing the final test, Riley had access to all of it. All ships, she said, and her voice carried across every communication frequency in the Coalition fleet. Humans heard her. Vakers heard her. Thorians and Grendoks and a dozen other species all heard her words at the same time. This is Sentinel Web. Follow my lead and stay tight. We're ending this now. She didn't wait for acknowledgement. Riley launched herself off the command ship's hull, the armor's propulsion system sending her streaking through space like a missile made of light. The Void Collective fleet loomed ahead, their dark ships blotting out the stars. They had seemed unstoppable just minutes ago. Now Riley was about to show them what a mistake they'd made coming back. She hit the first enemy ship at full speed. The armor's shields flared, punching through their hull like it was made of paper. Riley spun as she passed through, her hands moving in patterns that felt both new and ancient. Energy beams lanced out from her palms, targeting the ship's power core with surgical precision. The vessel exploded behind her, debris scattering into the void. But she wasn't done. Not even close. Riley reached out with her mind to the 3 predecessor installations she'd already activated. She could feel them like extensions of her own body now. The weapons platform near New Haven. The shield generator in the Corvin system. The massive cannon array orbiting the Thorian homeworld. All of them responded to her thoughts. Fire, she whispered. Beams of ancient energy crossed light years in an instant, following targeting data that Riley fed them directly from the armor. Void collective ships that had been advancing on New Haven suddenly found themselves under attack from 3 directions at once. Their formations broke apart as they tried to respond to threats they couldn't even see the source of. And Riley wasn't just attacking. As she moved through the enemy fleet, she projected shields around coalition vessels that were taking damage. A Vaker cruiser that had lost its deflectors suddenly found itself wrapped in a barrier of predecessor energy. A human destroyer that had been seconds from being destroyed got a second chance as Riley's shield absorbed the killing blow. She coordinated everything. Every ship in the coalition fleet received tactical data directly from her, showing them exactly where to shoot, when to move, how to maximize their firepower. It was like conducting an orchestra, except the instruments were warships and the music was the thunder of weapons fire. Commander Draxon stood on his bridge watching in amazement as his tactical display lit up with information. How is she doing this? He asked no one in particular. She's connected to everything, his sensor officer reported. The Sentinel isn't just one person anymore. She's the hub of an entire network. And then Riley did something that made everyone in the fleet hold their breath. She reached out to the dormant predecessor installations, all of them across the entire galaxy. Dozens of ancient weapons platforms and defense systems that had been sleeping for 10,000 years. She touched each one with her consciousness and whispered one word. Wake up. Across hundreds of worlds, ancient technology stirred to life. Power cores that had been cold since before most current civilizations existed began to glow. Weapons that predated recorded history charged their first shots in millennia. The predecessor's final gift to the galaxy activated all at once, responding to their true sentinel at last. The Void Collective must have realized what was happening. Their ships suddenly stopped advancing and started pulling back. But it was too late. Riley had them surrounded by firepower they couldn't match, coordinated by an intelligence they couldn't outsmart. All installations fire at will, she commanded. The night sky over New Haven lit up like fireworks as ancient weapons opened fire. The Void Collective's vanguard, the advanced fleet that was supposed to be unstoppable, shattered under the assault. Their dark ships cracked and burned. Those that could still move turned and fled back toward the portal they'd emerged from. Riley chased them, not to destroy but to make sure they left. She wanted them to take a message back to whatever dark place they came from. The galaxy had a protector now. The Sentinel had awakened. And if they ever came back, they'd find more than ancient stories waiting for them. The last Void Collective ship disappeared into dark space, and Riley finally stopped moving. She hung there in the vacuum, surrounded by the debris of battle and the distant glow of New Haven below. Her whole body ached. She'd been fighting for almost 8 hours straight, and the adrenaline was finally wearing off. Sentinel Webb, Draxon's voice came over her comm, returned to the flagship. The battle is won. Hours later, Riley stood in the council chambers. The armor had finally retracted, pulling back to show her face. She was exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, her hair a mess. But she was alive, and more importantly, so were the 2 million people on New Haven. The chamber was filled with representatives from every species in the coalition. They'd all gathered to see the human who had saved them. Riley felt uncomfortable with all the attention, but she stood straight and tried to look like she knew what she was doing. Commander Draxon approached her slowly. Then, to Riley's complete shock, the proud Vaker commander knelt before her. His warriors followed suit, and then the Thorians, and then everyone else in the room. Even Dr. Peterson knelt, though he had a huge grin on his face. Sentinel, Draxon said formally. I doubted you from the moment the armor chose you. I thought you were unworthy. I was wrong and I apologize. He looked up at her, genuine curiosity in his alien eyes. But I must ask a question that troubles me. How did your species, so young and inexperienced, produce someone worthy of this armor when civilizations millions of years old could not? Riley thought about that for a moment. She could have said something about human courage or adaptability or any of the things people always said made humanity special. But that wasn't the truth, and the predecessors had built the armor to seek truth. She shook her head, managing a tired smile. The armor didn't choose humanity, Commander. It chose someone who would choose others first. That's not a human thing. That's just what being worthy means. She looked around the room at all the different faces watching her. Aliens who had become friends. Dr. Peterson who had believed in her even when she didn't believe in herself. The stars visible through the windows, full of worlds she was now sworn to protect. The predecessors didn't build this armor for the strongest warrior, Riley continued. They didn't want the oldest civilization or the most advanced technology. They wanted someone who would use ultimate power responsibly. Someone who would give it up rather than abuse it. She felt the armor pulse gently against her skin. I'm honored it found me worthy. And I'm going to spend every day of my life proving it made the right choice. Vexit stepped forward from where he'd been standing at the back. The Void Collective will return, he said quietly. What we saw today was just their advance force. When they come back, it will be with their full might. Riley nodded. She'd known that already. This was just the beginning, not the end. Then we'll be ready, she said simply. All of us. Together. The council members started to disperse, talking among themselves about preparations and defenses. Draxon was already planning fleet movements. The Thorians were discussing ground fortifications. Everyone had work to do. Riley walked over to one of the large viewports and looked out at the stars. Her reflection stared back at her in the glass. The armor had retracted completely now, showing just a regular woman in a torn uniform. But she could still feel it there, just under her skin, ready to respond the instant she needed it. Her life had changed forever. A week ago she'd been Corporal Riley Webb, a combat engineer who fixed equipment and followed orders. Now she was the Sentinel, guardian of the galaxy, bearer of ancient power that could reshape civilizations. But looking at her reflection, Riley realized something important. The armor hadn't changed who she was at the core. She was still just a kid from a small town in Colorado who joined the Marines because she wanted to help people. Who believed in doing the right thing even when it was hard. Who would put herself in danger to protect strangers. The armor had seen that in her. That's why it chose her. Not because she was special or different, but because she was willing to be better than she had to be. Dr. Peterson came up beside her, looking out at the same stars. How are you holding up? He asked quietly. Tired, Riley admitted. Scared. Not sure I'm ready for this. Nobody ever is, Peterson said. But you did it anyway. You saved 2 million lives today, Riley. That's not nothing. She smiled a little. Just doing my job, document. Your job was combat engineer. This is a bit beyond that. Yeah, Riley laughed. Guess I got a promotion. They stood there in comfortable silence for a moment, watching New Haven spin peacefully below. The evacuation ships were returning now, bringing people back to their homes. Life would go on. The predecessors knew what they were doing, Peterson said eventually. When they built that armor, they understood something important. Power doesn't corrupt everyone. Just most people. But if you can find someone who'll give it up rather than misuse it, someone who sees it as responsibility instead of privilege, then maybe, just maybe, you've found someone worthy. Riley thought about the merger protocol, about how close she'd come to dissolving into energy and leaving her humanity behind. She'd been willing to do it. And that willingness, that readiness to sacrifice everything, had been the final test. I'm not going to let them down, she said quietly. The predecessors trusted me with this. The coalition is counting on me. I won't fail them. I know you won't, Peterson said. He clapped her on the shoulder. Because you're Riley Webb. And apparently that's exactly what the galaxy needed. As the doctor walked away, Riley stayed at the viewport, looking out at the infinite stars. Somewhere out there, the Void Collective was regrouping, planning their return. Somewhere out there, other threats waited in the darkness. But somewhere out there, on 100 worlds, ancient predecessor installations stood ready. Weapons that had defended civilization once before, now awakened and waiting for her command. Riley touched the viewport glass, her fingers leaving a small mark. Just a Marine from Colorado who believed in doing the right thing. Apparently that was enough. The Sentinel was ready. And when the darkness came again, it would find the galaxy defended by someone who had proven they deserved the power to protect it.